today in Kozhikode to talk to you about Kerala's own Parukutty Neithyaramma, Destiny's Child.
Yes, we're absolutely delighted. Thank you for coming out in this heat, lunch hour and all. And we are honestly honored and privileged to be able to speak about Parukutty in Kerala, in our state, in our home state. It is really an honor, and we're very grateful to all of you who have come out to hear a Parukutty story, and to the KLF, of course, for giving us this opportunity. It's the first time we are being able to speak about Parukutty in Kerala. So we are absolutely honored and delighted.
Thank you all for being here.
That's the book. Raghu's got it in his hand. This is the book. She's the protagonist. It's Destiny's Child, the undefeatable reign of Cochin's Parukutty Neithyaramma. Parukutty was the consort of the Maharaja of Cochin. Maharaja's on the screen now. Maharaja Ramavarma the 16th of Cochin. Now, he was, besides being the Maharaja, he was also she was also Raghu's great-grandmother.
Yes, Parukutty Neithyaramma was my great-grandmother. And here on the screen you would see photographs of me with her. In the first one, I'm sitting in a pram with her standing by my side, and in the other, I'm a little more grown up, standing by her with my father at the back.
Yes.
Parukutty Neithyaramma was my great-grandmother from both sides of the family, because my father had married his first cousin. And I grew up in a large joint family in her houses in Kunur and in Thrissur. I became especially close to her because she took over the caring and the looking after of me after my mother died when I was 9 years old. This was very typical of her, because whenever there was someone in need, she tended to look after that person. For an example, when her mother died when she was 10 years old, she began to look after her brother and cared for him right until the time he became an adult. And when you read the book, you will see many, many instances when she looked after various members of the family. As a large joint family, yes, we lunched together and we dined together, but the special time I had with her was in the afternoon. In those days, I was a very chubby person, very fat, and I loved my food. And when I sat with her for tea in the afternoon, she would give me all the things I wanted, ghee roast, palada, whatever I wanted. And while I was sitting and talking with her, she would tell me stories about the days that early days. She would tell me stories about the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. She would give me a lot of advice. And above all, finance was her passion. And she would talk to me about money and how one should be very careful about money. And that's probably the reason I became a banker and very comfortable with figures.
Yes, and very stingy too, yeah?
I won't say that.
So anyway.
But, she was my great-grandmother. She was my Valyama. And I loved her. I never really thought about writing a story about her, because there she was, larger than life.
Yeah, she was just his grandmother, great-grandmother. He didn't want to write about her. I mean, it's like you don't value what's in your backyard. So it was with Raghu. In fact, I had heard of Parukutty long before my marriage. I'd heard she was a very powerful, very determined, very brave woman who stood, expressed her opinion and, stood by her opinion. This, you're talking about a woman in the early 20th century. Even now, women have difficulty expressing themselves or standing by what they believe in. So this was her in the early 20th century. Obviously, I admired her. And when I got married to Raghu, I thought that she'd make a great story, that it would be a great story to write about. But for Raghu, like he said, it was just his great-grandmother, and he saw nothing in her to write about.
That's very true. It so happened that when our elder daughter Divya got married, our younger daughter a while later said, "I'd like to know my roots." So we said, yes, we should meet that need. And we came to Kerala, we went to Cochin, and the very afternoon that we arrived, we went to the Dutch Palace at Mattancherry. That is the picture of the Dutch Palace in Mattancherry. Many of you might have been there. We climbed up the stairs, and immediately after climbing up the stairs to the right is a large hall. In this hall you have life-size portraits of the Maharajas of Cochin. And very prominent there was that of my great-grandfather, Ramavarma the 16th. I was really excited and I asked Nikhila to stand by his photograph because I wanted to take a picture of her with her great-great-grandfather. And I take a lot of time. I wanted to get a perfect picture. So
that's true. He takes so much time that we attracted so much attention. Yes.
Yes. And the commotion was so much that various people came up to us and said, no, this is a museum. You cannot take photographs. Very typical of an Indian museum. And hearing the noise, the curator came, Mr. Jadhav, and he inquired what was happening. So I told him that I wanted to take a picture of Nikhila against the portrait of her great-great-grandfather. And he said, by all means, take as many photographs as you like. And so we did. And after that, he took us to his office, gave us coffee, and told us many stories about the period of their reign, which was from 1940 to 1932. And after that, actually presented us with a couple of photographs, one of her and one of the Maharaja, books that have been, the photographs that have been, reproduced in the book.
Yes, so the next morning we went to the Hill Palace. Raghu, show the Hill Palace. Yeah, that's the Hill Palace, the one side of the Hill Palace. Here now we knew what to do. Drop a name, a family name, and before you know it, doors open. And Raghu did want the doors opened here because both his mother and father had been born in the Hill Palace. So he wanted to see the rooms and want to know perhaps maybe his mother or father had been born in one of those rooms. So that was important to us. So we did get the doors open.
Yes, and the caretakers were more than happy. They opened all the rooms to us. They showed everything. And later on, when I was walking through the grounds, I remembered stories about my from my father about how they used to play with several of their cousins. One of that cousin was a boy called Balan, who later came to be world-renowned as Swami Chinmayananda.
Yep.
This was a really lovely experience, and I could now realize why my father never, in spite of my asking him many times to take me to the Hill Palace, he never did, because he had such lovely memories of the Hill Palace and he wanted to remember it in his old grandeur.
But the problem is when you're writing about family,
and later on, I met many Tamburans from the Cochin royal family and many other people, and all of them spoke very, very highly of Parukutty Neithyaramma. That was when I decided, yes, I needed to know more about my Valyamma. I needed to do some research about her life and what she did.
So like I said, when you're writing about family, the general opinion is that it's going to be a eulogy to the person. It's going to, flatter her enormously and, hide all her weak points. But we were very clear that we wanted a historical novel. So the historical facts are absolutely well corroborated by historical documentation and evidence. We have not gone wrong in that at all. We have been very careful in making sure. So this is his family, and obviously, the little children there are his mother.
That's my father and mother actually in the Hill Palace in those wonderful days. Because my father, as I had mentioned earlier, married his first cousin, and on the other side is Parukutty Neithyaramma with her 4 children. The person right at the end is my grandfather, Arvindaksha Menon, and behind him is my grandmother, Raghu Palat.
Now, Raghu's a Libra, and being a Libra, he balances everything. And actually, he was more unfair to Parukutty in her, in describing her and speaking about her, because he wanted to be more than fair. He wanted to make sure that he didn't, eulogize her in any way. And on the contrary, I was kinder to her. So we stuck to facts. We stuck to historical facts. But there is an advantage in writing about family, in that these were his family. It was his great-grandmother, it was his parents, it was his grandparents we were writing about. Obviously, our story will have far more personal elements than somebody outside writing about it.
And we had access to these people.
Yes, we had access to the photographs.
And of course to family photographs.
Yeah. And so this was a huge advantage as far as publishers were concerned. In fact, all the publishers who approached us for this book, we went with Penguin Random House, and what fascinated them was that somebody from within the family was writing a story about a person that they were very closely related to, and yet was sticking to historical facts. And honestly, if you go through the bibliography in our book, you will find that we have done extensive research.
To give you an example of the kind of research that we did, we were able to access the Cochin administration reports written annually by the Diwan from prior to their reign right up till the end. Then there were books written at that time, the days that were Kochi Raja Tirmanas. Then we were able to access from Britain, letters written by the Diwan and the British resident. These were invaluable because they gave a very, very balanced view. Plus, of course, there were many, many articles, and we were able to also access the Cochin royal family archives and even videos from that period. So all this gave us a tremendous amount of information, plus, of course, family stories, because as my grandfather and my grandmother and my parents lived through that period.
And also we had a lot of Malayalam documents which we got translated. But let me go on with the story. We call it Destiny's Child, right? If you go through the book, you'll know exactly why there was no other title possible for this book. Because destiny seems to have shaped her whole life. All the ups, all the downs, she just went through, because that's where destiny pushed her through. Now, I'm giving you just one story. This is right in the beginning of the book. This, many of you might recognize as Chotanikara temple. Anybody been there? Okay, it is a very beautiful and powerful temple. Please go there. We go there every year, and it was very, very important to Parukutty. Now, the reason why she started going to Chotanikara and not to the temple frequented by the royals is a story that is in the book, and I'm not getting into that. I'm just telling you that she used to go to Chotanikara every single day. Now, this was when she was 14 years old. She had a sambandham with a prince, a Tampuran, who was 17 years older than her. And she used to visit this temple every day. She also had an acquisitive instinct. She loved to, jewelry, money, everything. And that also, there is a, correlation as to why she was like that. But anyway, we won't go into that. This story is about Chotanikara. What happened was that she used to go every day to this temple. At home, when she had the sambandham with the Tampuran, she also had this passion for jewelry. So every time the jeweler used to come with his little bag of goodies, she wanted something. She wanted one ornament or two ornaments or so on. In the beginning, the Tampuran, the prince, he indulged her. He bought her what she wants. After all, she was much younger than him, and it was a new relationship, so he did indulge her. Then it grew to a point where he was getting pretty fed up of all the demands, and she was getting rather extravagant with her demands. So one day in anger, he said to her, "You know what? You go every day to that temple. Now ask the Bhagavati to give you what you want, because I certainly can't afford you. I cannot afford any more." So now she was a child of 14 or 15, and she took it to heart. So she used to go to the temple so frequently that there was a space called Neithyaramma's Padi. She used to sit in the same place every year. So then she started opening her heart out to the Devi there. Then this went on for many years. One day when she had said her prayers, much later, and she went to the priest to get his blessings and get the prasadam, the priest said to her, "Veedu Mariyalle. So you've changed house, right?" So she said no. She was rather bewildered by why he asked so, and she said, "No, I haven't changed house." So he said, "Oh, I thought you had changed house." Anyway, she put this out of her mind. She got out of the temple, she got into a little bullock cart, and she went back to the prince's palace. When she got back there, she found a very excited prince informing her that he had become the Raja of Cochin. Overnight, the incumbent Raja had abdicated, and in the morning, her Sambandhi was now Raja of Cochin. Now, Rajas don't abdicate. There was no cause for him to abdicate. He was not ill in health, nothing. So, but he had abdicated. And this meant that she was now the consort of the Raja. This was, remarkable news, unbelievable news. And what is more uncanny is that the Raja and Maharaja Ramavarma died in the same year, within 2 months of each other. So had the Raja not abdicated that day, or abdicated at all, Raja Ramavarma would never have got onto the throne. So what the priest said was absolutely true. She was changing houses, she was changing homes, she was moving into the royal palace, the Hill Palace.
And how did that happen? It so happened that one day at a banquet,
Raghu, would you show the new, the previous, the abdicated Maharaja,
yes,
his pictures there? This is the
abdicated Maharaja Raja Ramavarma the 15th.
Yeah.
What happened was there was a banquet, and at the banquet, the British resident stood up and announced to the assembly, "I am very sorry to inform you that His Highness Ramavarma has decided to abdicate." And the Viceroy has very reluctantly accepted his request. The entire assemblage was shocked. No one more than Ramavarma the 15th himself. And why was he shocked? Because, every time he had an altercation with the British, he would dash off a letter to the Viceroy threatening to abdicate. As far as the Raja was concerned, it was only a protest. He never really took it seriously, nor did he think anyone would take it seriously. But this was 1914. The war had just broken out, the First World War, and the British felt he had pro-German leanings. This was because he had invited the Crown Prince of Germany as a state guest to Cochin. The massive, massive forest project had been given not to a British company, but to a German company. The German consul Bueller was very, very often in Cochin, holidaying as a guest of the Raja, and also hunting in the forests of Cochin. So they did not want to take a risk, especially when Cochin was such a strategic port. So they took advantage of his last letter and announced the Raja has decided to abdicate, and he had no other alternative but to abdicate.
So when Raja Ram, at that time he was Raja, he becomes the first hereditary Maharaja later on in his reign. But when he resigned, when the abdicated Raja abdicated and Parukutty and her consort came to the throne, Cochin was in bad shape. They were financially bankrupt almost, and had outstretched themselves on many, many loans. So it was not the best time to take over Cochin.
Yes, because at that time, as I mentioned to you, the Paramikulam tramway project had just been concluded, for which Cochin had taken a large amount of loans. Then there was the Cochin-Shornu rail project, and Cochin was in very bad shape. It was practically bankrupt. And the British were also eyeing Cochin, because by annexing Cochin to British Malabar, they would have a continuous country and a port both in the east and the west coast. Maharaja Ramavarma the 16th and Parukutty Neithyaramma were not going to allow this. So what they did was they really went on to a war footing and cut expenditure by as much as 25%. And within 4 years, Cochin was debt-free. After that, being financial wizards, they also wanted to improve the lot of Cochin. That was the time when Lord Wellington had taken over as the governor of Madras. And they went to Ooty within 2 or 3 months of his taking over and invited him to Cochin to see the potential of Cochin. Lord Wellington came and agreed that Cochin would make a fine harbour, as a consequence of which Cochin is now one of the finest harbours in India. And the offshoot was, of course, the 775-acre Wellington Island. Apart from that, they were also very focused on the people. So they did a tremendous amount to help the people to bring in reforms, one of which was empowering people. And people were empowered from the smallest level, from the panchayat, in the villages, in the municipalities, and it culminated with an act by which created the legislature of Cochin. It was one of the first elected legislatures in the country, with 60% being elected members, the balance being, of course, brought in by the government.
Okay, so can we have the next slide, please, Raghu? Okay, that's Parukutty when she recently got married. Recently had the sambandham. And like I said, she was just 14 years old. Next. This was the Prince's Palace at that time. And what it was is that Parukutty had a sambandham and she was based in Thrissur. And as you know, the woman stayed in her own tarwar. So she stayed back in Thrissur. But the prince didn't visit her. Few months passed by and the prince still didn't visit her. So her father consulted with the prince's father and they decided that they would take her to Tripunithara since the prince wasn't visiting Thrissur. So they both take her to Tripunithara, and when she gets, she's got stars in her eyes. She thinks, oh wow, I'm going to live in a palace, and all the things that she thought she would, expect from, moving to Tripunithara. But when she got there, her prince was rather startled by her arrival. Nobody actually brought the sambandhi to the prince's palace. So he really didn't know what to do. But his father then suggested that, okay, she's not allowed to live in the palace because that is the practice. You're not allowed to live in the palace. They suggested that she live in the outhouse. Now, the staff took her to the outhouse, but when she saw the outhouse, it was all dilapidated and had not been cleaned. So she wrinkles up her nose and she's really devastated. She was expecting so much and suddenly nothing. So there were tears in her eyes, but this little girl, 14 years old, wipes off those tears. She turns around and she's just under 5 foot tall. And she sees these 3 very powerful, much taller men in front of her, and she says, I'm not staying in that dirty outhouse. I don't want to stay in Tripunithara. I am going back to my house. Take me back to my tarwar in Thrissur. The 3 men were absolutely dumbfounded. This was not what they expected. Now, but the prince, he was a very different person. He was very progressive. And honestly, he saw a spark in her. And that really appealed to him. He felt to himself, here's a little kid, and she's ready to, voice her opinion and stand by it. He loved that. And so he suggested, and anyway, she was only 14, so he suggested that she stay in the palace. But the moment Parukutty stepped over the threshold of this palace, she broke centuries-old tradition. And not just that, she had instilled the anger of the Tampurans, the princes, the Tampurastis, who felt that there's no place for a Nair upstart in the palace. and her own community, the Nair women who did not till then have that privilege. Isn't that right?
That's right, absolutely. Under the system at that time, the thing was, the custom was that the Nair woman stayed in her own tarwad, and she was visited by those who she had a relationship with, which were Tamburans, Nambudris, and other Nairs. This suited the Tamburans and the Nambudris very well, because they could have as many children as they wanted with no financial responsibility. And although descent was through the female under the Marumakatayam system, and wealth devolved through females, the person who had the control of this wealth was the Karnavan, the eldest male member of the family. And very often the Karnavans abused this right. They spent the money on themselves and on their children and their partners who were not part of the family, part of the Tarwad, to the detriment of the other members of the Tarwad. Parukutty did feel this was very, very unfair. So what she did was, she enacted an act later, once they were in power, by which the control of the Karnavan was curtailed. But the father, the person, the man, was made responsible for his partner and his children. The property was, the family property could be divided amongst members, and this was the death knell of the Marumakatayam system.
What's the next slide, please? So yes, now this, as I said, the prince was a very different progressive prince, all right? But when Parukutty had her sambandham, she was 14 and with not much education. She knew Malayalam, she knew how to speak it, read it and write it. She also knew a little bit about music, but that was the extent of her education. When she had her sambandham, the prince, who was extremely erudite, he introduced her to Malayalam literature. So education went up a little bit more. However, besides that, she had no basic education. Now, they decided, the prince had to go to Madras on some work. And he knew that his sambandhi would be alone, feel very alone in the palace. So he took her along on this trip to Madras. There was a Rani called Rani of Pudukkottai. She took a fancy to Parukutty. She liked her very much. So every day during their stay in Madras, the Rani would take her around Madras. One day, as they were riding through the city in their horse carriage, they came across a bookshop called Higginbotham's. Now, this was written in English, but the Rani read it beautifully and she pronounced it very well. Now, this really impressed Parukutty. She then was determined that she had to learn English as well. So, on the trip back, she kept on pestering the prince and said, I want to learn English, I want to learn English. Well, he said, yes, as I said, he was a very different prince. He said, I will get tutors to teach you English on condition that you learn arithmetic and agriculture. Why arithmetic and agriculture? The prince was a financial wizard. In fact, he had advised the previous Raja, and he really knew how to invest money. And where did he invest? Most princes lived on their stipends, the money they received from the state. This prince saved and he bought land. He invested in agriculture. So he was increasing in income. This was not the done thing, of course, in those days. However, that's what he did. So he wanted her to know about agriculture. He sent her out to the fields to learn, and she learned about agriculture. He also wanted her to have a very, very good math brain. He realized that she could pick up figures very easily, and in fact, that was her forte. And he wanted her inputs. So she said she was absolutely delighted. She was a quick learner. She learned all this. She started helping him in his investments. Then he was also an expert in Ayurveda. He used to treat patients, especially for snake bites. So she started studying a bit about Ayurveda. He was also what is called a Gauli Shastra. He used to read that. He could foretell when he heard the cricket make its clicking sound. You know, it goes. So when he heard that, he could tell that a patient was coming who needed a particular form of medication. And Parukutty had learned, and he'd tell her, Parukutty, to mix the herbs required for the medication. So she realized that with all this learning, she was very supportive of her husband. She was helping him expand his assets. She was helping him, increase his success. So she realized the power of education. Now she decided that no Malayali girl should, in her state, go without education. Education must be most easily available to the girl child. For that, she gave scholarships, she gave clothing, everything. She provided everything, every incentive you could think of to encourage families to send the girls to school.
When they took over, there were less than 20% of the girls were educated, and there were very few schools for girls. By the end of their reign, there was a school in every village, every taluk, every town in Cochin state. And over 68% of the girls were educated. This is more than in many states in India today. Apart from that, because they were so focused on education, as much as 18.8% of the budget, the state budget, was spent on education alone. That's nearly 1/5. Colleges were built. And because of this, Cochin became the most literate state in the entire British Empire in the East. This was their focus.
Yes. Then another thing was that, can I have the change of slide, please? Thank you. She was very certain that women had an instinctive understanding of the pulse of society. That they knew, because they spent on food, they bought provisions, they knew the needs of society. So she felt that women's representation in legislature was very, very important. So in fact, yes. She insisted that there was a woman represented in the Cochin legislature.
That is Thotakad Madhavi Amma.
Yeah, she was the first woman legislature in all of India.
In all of India.
So because she wanted somebody there.
Yes.
Next slide.
The other fact was that they were also very focused on the welfare of the people. You know, they apart from developing the state, they wanted to better the lives of people. In just shortly after the World War broke out, there was a tremendous famine in Kerala, in Cochin state. They had rice imported from Burma. Soup kitchens were set up in Thrissur, in Ernakulam, and all the other major towns and villages in Cochin state. Sanitation was improved, especially when there was an epidemic in Cochin, and the general lot of people were improved. Apart from that, hospitals were constructed, medical facilities were made, agriculture was improved, and as a consequence of which, the King Emperor George V presented her with the Kaiser-i-Hind Medal for social work.
Also, she became Lady...
and she was known as Lady Ramavarma and entitled to a 17-gun salute in her own name.
Yes, that's right. And now the next slide will show you the round. It may be less green now, but this is the Thrissur round. Now the roads that your traffic now presently uses in Thrissur was built by her. It was envisaged by her. The drainage system was set in during their reign. And even today they tell me that road, even in spite of the heavy monsoons in Kerala, the road does not get flooded. So that was the foresight that she had, the enormous foresight regarding infrastructure.
And she also organized at that time in Thrissur town, which was the first water pipeline for houses. She conceived creating the Pichi Dam, which happened many years later. So she was a visionary.
And way ahead of our time. This is the early 20th century. You must understand this. Next one. Yeah. All right. So what I found remarkable about this couple was their enormous partnership. It was a partnership of equals. Today, I don't think many can say that they have a partnership of equals with their spouse. It was so much that they depended on each other, they relied on each other, they trusted each other implicitly. The Maharaja knew that in any situation, no matter what, Parukutty would have his back. And this turned out to be true. There was a time when the Maharaja fell very ill. But since they had worked with one mind, she knew exactly what he wanted done, and she fulfilled all that. Not just that, obviously, if there's any weakness in a ruler, their enemies come up. Now, Britain obviously wanted Cochin very desperately. They wanted a weak ruler so that they could, overpower him. Then there were others vying for the throne. There were Tampurans who wanted the throne. Naturally, it's a situation of power. And the incumbent Maharaja was not keeping too well. So this was an opportunity to oust him. However, Parukutty sticks by him and makes sure that the crown is never snatched away from her Sambandhi. And in fact, till the day he dies, he remains Maharaja Ramavarma the 16th.
Actually, when you read the book, you will see the various things that she did.
Yes,
in order to ensure that the crown remained
with her.
With
There's a lot of intrigue in the book as well.
Lots of intrigue.
The next one? What is the next? All right, so the Maharaja dies. Now, Parukutty was determined that she was not going to stay in Tripunithara and be the source of pity for the rest of the people there. She knew that she had made some pretty powerful enemies. So she had already, purchased houses in Kunur, in Thrissur.
Yes, she made actually provision for herself. She bought 2 estates, tea estates in Kunur, in the Nilgiris, and also built a palatial house, which was called Ratnavilas, named after her 2 children, which is Ratnam and Vilasini in Thrissur.
But the amazing thing is, she decided not to go directly to those houses. Instead, she wanted to go to Switzerland. Didn't know the language, had no clue of the country, and decided to go to Switzerland.
And she was a strict vegetarian.
So she applied for a passport. And the British immediately gave the passport because she was the first ruler of India who supported Mahatma Gandhi's national movement. Now, the British got worried. Like Raghu had told you, she was very popular with the general public, with the people. Now, if after she lost the throne, she decided to incite the people towards nationalism, Britain would have a major, major problem. So they quickly issued that passport. That little piece of paper there, that was her passport. And off she went to Switzerland. And from Switzerland, she went to England. She took his father, by the way. It was
actually, she in the Hill Palace in Tripunithara, she actually wove khadi. She had looms.
Yes.
And she made khadi. And she went to meet Mahatma Gandhi when he came to Ernakulam, dressed in khadi.
Yes.
Yes, she took my father without knowing the language or anything. She took him first to Switzerland and then to England. And when she came back with this magnificent car.
She saw a car that she liked very much in London. And yes, she was by then a very affluent woman. She knew how to invest. And she came back with this car. Fancy, what was it? Bentley.
It's a Bentley. And that is an actual photograph of this Bentley, which I have gone in many times. It's in the back, it's actually like a little room. There's a bed. There is a chair, a table with 2 chairs, all stuck together. And so when a person traveled from Thrissur up to Kunur, which is where she would spend these summer months, you could either sit on the table and write or eat a meal or lie down on the bed and sleep. And very often, sometimes when we were in boarding school, this Bentley, when another car was not available, used to come to pick us up. And
they were very chuffed with that.
Everyone used to come and have a look at this old, it's a 1929 model Bentley.
So now we write historical novels. Why we call them historical novels is though, as I've said from the beginning, we base everything on the facts, historical facts, we write it as a story. We intertwine a story into the book because though there are lots of history buffs who would read anything historical, like Raghu. there are a lot more people like me who like a story. And a story, a human real life story, there's nothing more compelling than a real life story, honestly. And we see that in movies. So yes, we write historical novels, and this seemed to have worked for us, because when we first released Destiny's Child, we were passing through Cochin, and somebody told us that, you know, we go to the they wanted signatures at the Cochin airport. And when we went to sign the book, there was a lady who came up to us and said, you know what, I've heard this story, I've heard from others who have read it in English, but I want it in Malayalam. So at that time, there was no idea we didn't have anybody asking us for a Malayalam translation. But we're very happy to announce that DC Books have taken both our books, and both will come out in Malayalam editions very soon, later this year. So we're very excited about that. Also, another thing which worked for us is because it was a story, it got the attention of a big production house, Dharma Productions, which is Karan Johar's production house. So the first book, The Case That Shook the Empire, which is about Sir C. Shankaran Nair and the Jallianwala Bagh case, is being made into a movie. In fact, it's in its second schedule. It has a huge cast. Akshay Kumar, Ananya Pandey, Amala Paul,
yes.
And now Madhavan has also joined the cast. So we're very excited about it.
And also the director
yes.
is Karan Tyagi, who is a Harvard law graduate.
So he's
very focused on the legal case.
On the case. So he's dealing, and he's a wonderful director. I've spoken to him many times. He really is, we hope, going to do a great job with the movie. And anyway, our issue was that Kerala leaders, Kerala rulers are not known everywhere. It's just a line in a history book sometimes. More often than not, nobody knows. Even in Kerala, when we wrote our first book, there was an article in the Malayalam Manorama, I think, which said Malayalam Marda Malayali, which means even in Kerala, you don't know about your rulers. And this is what we want to change. We are focusing on rulers, leaders from Kerala. And now, if a movie is produced, right? Raghu, you say
yes.
that, it's all about North Indian history. He loves history.
I know, when you talk about history, you only hear about North Indian history.
He keeps
about
saying
how
that.
Alexander conquered thing, you hear about the Mughal Empire, you hear about all kinds of, the Khiljis, the slave dynasty, the Mauryas, all of them. But very little is known south of the Vindhyas, especially Kerala.
So
and we are focusing entirely on Kerala.
On Kerala.
We've now written 2 books on
Kerala
Malayalis. Our third book we are working on is also on
yes.
Kerala. We're writing about Martanda Varma.
Yes, and you see, when a producer picks it up for a movie, you get a larger audience. People asking me, oh, he's a commercial film maker, why this? You know what? He reaches out to the audience. Everybody knows about Karan Johar and his movies. So I am delighted that it's going to reach a larger audience. Secondly, if it comes on the OTT platform, then it goes to second and third screens, which means it goes worldwide. Why would I not want a story from Kerala to get worldwide attention? So this is, I think, a wonderful thing, that movies are now being made from books. I think it's a great thing, because we have truly great stories in our leaders. I hope more movies are made. I hope Destiny's Child becomes a movie.
And I really think South India people should get to know about South
Yes.
India.
Is there anything else we have to say?
That's it.
All right, so that's what basically our story is about. The book has much more, because it's got anecdotal. It's like a story. So if any of you have any questions, please give it to, tell us, and we'll try our best to answer. We're basically storytellers, and we like to tell a story, and we find her story very compelling, so we wrote about it. That's
And
it.
our main idea is to bring out Kerala, because Kerala has so many heroes, people who no one is really, especially the rest of India, has not heard about.
So please read about Kerala. Yes, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you.
Is there any question?
So I'm myself from Thrissur, and then I was so taken aback when I heard that this person had a great impact on my city, and I've never heard of her name. So, and then when it comes to city, I feel like a lot in city planning, we always hear the name Shaktan Tambran in Thrissur. It's one of the prominent leaders. He did this, he did that, and I was often told that my parents, everyone, like, because Shaktan Thamran, he was the one planted, he was the one who made the road around the temple, etc. So I was so shocked when I heard this incident. So yeah.
Let me tell you about Parukutty Neithyaramma in the sense, yes, Shaktan Thamran is the one who made Thrissur the capital of Cochin state, and he did tremendous things like the Thekangada. He was the one who cut the teak forest there. He brought in Thrissur Puram. You know, he was a very, very important
no taking away from him at
king.
all. No taking away.
But the one who actually tarred and created the round is Parukutty Neithyaramma. She is the one who created the drainage system in such a way that Thrissur round and that area never gets flooded, because pipes were kept put underneath in such a way that it went to the Padams and the river, so that, which is why the round is such a great place at the moment.
It's basically regarding infrastructure that she had so much foresight. Yeah.
And she did all this to Thrissur because she knew that after my great grandfather died, she didn't want to remain in Tripunithura at all. She wanted to get back to Thrissur, so she had built a house and everything there.
It's not just that she's done, yeah. So, anybody else with a question?
Yes. Okay. So, first of all, going to the royalty, because we are not used to getting a royalty here around.
We are not.
Okay, anyhow, you have a legacy which you are writing about, and we are very happy to see you.
Thank you.
Okay. Also, an English lady, I suppose, who has made Kerala her home and speaking for us, and we are absolutely delighted on the camera as well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Really, thank you.
Okay. Well, what I would like to say is that in our state, we have education, but we have English education, but it's not being popularized in the right way. Because people all over here are inhibited, They just don't face an audience with confidence in English language. Because madam is speaking in English and everybody is listening to you and are understanding you. But nobody, I can understand that not many people are coming up and speaking their mind in front of you. That is a bit worrying, and especially Mr. Raghu, who had all this exposure of international experience, should take efforts to make popular English language in Kerala. Maybe you can conduct some classes or workshops so that more and more people can get to know about you and your lifestyle, and through you English should be propagated in a rather better way. And I congratulate you naming the book Destiny Style, because I have written a poem called Destiny Smart, which I will give you personally if you are interested.
Thank you.
I live in Kerala and I have developed my English in my own way. I am fascinated and obsessive about English. Thank you for the audience.
Thank you so much. Very much. Thank you. I think our time's up. We've got a screen here which says in red, time's up. So we have to stop talking. But thank you so much for being such a patient audience. And honestly, please be proud of your heritage. Please spread it, because if we don't spread it, I'm sure nobody else is going to do it. So whether it's in English, whether it's in Malayalam, whether whatever language, we need to be proud of our heritage. We have a very, very, very strong heritage. And history is that part of the heritage. So please, I request you.
And our focus is really to bring Kerala and the importance of Kerala to the rest of the world. And writing in English helps, because it gives access to a much greater audience. Thank you.